When it comes to hype trains, there wasn't a bigger one than Deadpool versus Wolverine, which came out this past weekend. I saw it with my wife, who actually fell asleep halfway through the movie. She was tired. I have to give her the benefit of the doubt. But I digress. And I decided to let it simmer before I dropped a review or reaction to it. Simply just because it's one of those movies that, first of all, shouldn't be spoiled. And I'm going to spoil it now because most people, I feel like, who really wanted to see this movie in the first are going to go see it. So, spoilers ahead. Be prepared for that. But before we get into it, I do want to talk more about the fact that this movie had so much hype and so much weight to it. And I really think that it was executed in a way that wasn't necessarily about the MCU and all that, even though there are implications and weight to things that happen in the film. Overall, this was fan service. This is literally like a orgasm of fan service, rumor mills, spoiler threads coming to life in front of our eyes, and it's pretty crazy. It was pretty crazy. So, in terms of what Feige said, he came out and said, Deadpool versus Wolverine is the third most consequential film in the entire MCU in terms of like impact on the MCU. And he might have been trolling a little bit because when I heard that or read that, I was thinking, okay, so there's going to be some like crazy stuff that goes down in this movie that like has a lot of weight and implications. And there is. And I think when I watched it and I came out of the theater, I didn't feel that weight. But after the new announcement with Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, I started to kind of see the puzzle pieces start to come together. And I'll break down that theory at the end of this video, but I really want to talk about this movie first before we get into that. I'll lead into that. So stick around. Make sure you subscribe and follow all that crap. Anyways, so for me, like I said, this is about fan service. Ryan Reynolds really understands his fans. He understands what the people want to see, regardless of like logic, regardless of impact. There's just things that you want to see. You want to see gratuitous violence, you want to see cameos, you want a decent story, and you want to feel good when you leave the theater based on the comedy level. And the comedy is actually probably one of the critical things about this and why this movie is so successful. This movie is rated R, and it was interesting because when I went into the theater with my wife and I was looking around the crowd, I saw a family. It was like a family with like 3 kids, all of them under the age of like 4. One was a brand new baby. And you could tell it was a situation where the husband was like kind of forcing the family to go because there was probably like a whole argument. I make stories in my head. But as soon as I saw them, I'm like, this is not going to work out. This is not going to work out. Because I already know that if Ryan Reynolds was given the full rated R, just unleashed via Disney, he's going to go crazy in this movie. And sure enough, after the opening sequence, which was extremely violent, I saw the family get up and walk away. And for me, I kind of just smirked a little bit. I kind of like looked at my wife and I was just like, yeah, this movie's going to be pretty fire for that regards, because it's been a while since we've experienced a movie on this level with that much violence and comedy all up in your face. And I remember the early 2000s, like when Judd Apatow was out there killing it with all these like raunchy films that have like lewd jokes and all kinds of stuff. That kind of died out in the teens up to now, cancel culture, Gen Z, whatever you want to call it, to where those type of movies just don't find any traction. But this movie was hilarious. It had a lot of lewd comedy, had a lot of violence, it had a lot of stuff that like you don't necessarily want your children to see, but they want to see it, and they'll probably end up seeing it eventually. But it's for adults. It's for people like me who are like grown-ass men who just want to see some dope shit on camera. And that's what this film delivered. It delivered on that, on a 10 out of 10 on that, in terms of just like cool cameos from Blade, Gambit, Elektra, the Chris Evans, Johnny Storm from Fantastic Four, just all kinds of really, really cool cameos. Henry Cavill as Wolverine, just cool stuff. You know what I'm saying? Stuff that didn't really like have like a lot of weight to it in the grand scheme of things, which it actually might. Which I'll get to that in a second. It ends up being one of those things where you just feel like a kid again watching these characters and seeing these characters play out, and you just kind of flash back, like seeing Wesley Snipes as Blade. Like, you know, I immediately flash back to 1998 when the first Blade movie came out, and it's cool that he was able to get a send off. And at this point, he might end up being Blade. The way that the Blade movie is going right now, he might end up being the next Blade, or they're continuing the role of Blade in some capacity, simply because of the situation with Blade. That's a whole other video. But it was great to see Wesley Snipes. He was very natural in his role. It didn't feel forced. The story worked out to where the characters made sense. And all in all, it was fun. And I can't remember the last time that I had like a lot of fun in the movies, where I was going to the movies and just enjoying what's in front of me. With that said, like, the movie's not perfect. I think that the pacing of this movie was extremely fast. And I think like the movie only clocks in at 2 hours and 7 minutes. And at this point, humans are conditioned for 2.5, 3 hour long movies. I mean, look at Oppenheimer, look at all these other movies that are past the 2 hour mark. And they could have afforded to add a couple more minutes, maybe another 20, 30 minutes, maybe even focusing on how certain characters got purged and put into the void. That would have been interesting. I mean, there's a lot they could have done, but the pacing was just so blistering fast to where it's a fun ride, but you kind of want more by the time the film is over. And I kind of wanted to feel like content on the story, because even the way it ended, it was ambiguous to be like, okay, so well, what's next? Like, what does this mean for Deadpool? What does this mean for Wolverine? They're all in the same universe kicking it, but what does this really mean, right? And so I hope that we can get more to that soon enough. But at this point, the next movie that's coming out is Captain America. And we'll see how that movie plays into all this. It seems to be its own separate thing right now. I don't think it's like part of the multiverse thing. And maybe it will be. But so far, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's going to be more like street level government spy shit, which is cool. I think that those movies work really well. As a contrast to like the galactic stuff and then like the overall arcing story stuff. But yeah, the pacing was a big issue for me. I think the movie moved like really, really fast for me. The story was kind of weak, a little bit on the weak side for me in terms of just how the entire story as a whole, like it worked, but it felt like definitely they're just writing to get to a point so they could do certain stuff. Like even with like the guy from the TVA that was like going rogue and doing all that, his intentions and goals weren't like super clear. But he just did the stuff that he needed to do to get Deadpool to where he needed to be at so the movie could happen. Amazing fight scenes. Like the fight scene between Deadpool and Wolverine is actually fire. It's like 12 fire emojis. Like the first encounter that they have in the void, it's dope. Mostly because of the fact that it's rated R and they don't hold back. And you have to remember that these are two guys who have regenerative powers. So no one's dying in this fight. So they're just going crazy. It's nuts. It's really cool to see. And it might be one of the most violent scenes in MCU history. Just because of the context of it. Like I said, both these guys have regenerative powers. So they're just going at each other's throats. They're stabbing each other in the head, cutting off limbs. It's crazy. It's crazy, son. It's dope. But with all that said, I think that this movie did what it needed to do. I think it got the MCU fans re-energized. I feel that this movie does a good job of, entertaining us, which is the most important factor. Like, it's not like boring. I can understand the split in the audience because like this movie's not for everybody. This is not like I said. This is not like an Oppenheimer level movie, but it does scratch an itch for Marvel MCU fans who've been just wanting just dope movies to go see, because the last few have been just like, that was kind of good, but Deadpool versus Wolverine is at least good. If it's great, that comes down to like your own personal preference, but it's at least good for like the average viewer. It's a great, entertaining film. It's funny. Like I said, there's not like a lot of emotional weight or like character development, but if you grew up with Marvel and the Fox universe, then there's plenty and plenty of cool stuff in this movie for you, for sure. I love Channing Tatum's Gambit just because the fact that if you know the story behind that, they play into that. Like, he joked about, like, oh, I think I was born in the void, basically alluding to the fact that his movie was never made, because it wasn't. He was supposed to have a whole film spin-off, and while he looked a little weird in the costume, I attribute some of that to age. He's older now. This movie is supposed to come out 10 years ago in terms of him actually being able to be Deadpool. And so I think that overall, I just want more of connection. And that's where I get to my whole theory. So I know you guys have been waiting on this. And so recently, just yesterday or day before yesterday, they announced that Robert Downey Jr. is playing Doctor Doom. People are saying Victor Von Doom. I've been reading that, but I don't think that's actually been confirmed that he's playing Victor Von Doom, but he is playing Doctor Doom. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have from the Deadpool movie in terms of like the actual weight that this movie has on the MCU comes down to the Void. The Void is everything at this point. The Void is the entire multiverse saga wrapped up, because when you think about like how they set up the Void, this is where all the people getting purged go to, and Deadpool just showed you that anybody can be in the Void just based off of the TVA purging them from the timeline. Like, we've seen Chris Evans, Johnny Storm from Fantastic Four, that we've seen Blade, we've seen Elektra. You know what I'm saying? These are all separate films and movies that obviously these characters got purged. Now, why are these characters getting purged? We don't know. And that's kind of what I really hoped from Deadpool, was that we kind of got like a teaser, maybe even like a quick scene of like Elektra doing some Elektra stuff, and she gets zapped by some mysterious person. Maybe someone's going around purging these people. Like, why do these people get purged? That's something I really want to know, especially when they talk about the anchor bodies of each universe. Obviously, these superheroes weren't the anchor bodies, or maybe they were and their universes got destroyed. None of this is really clarified. And so there's a lot to really unpack there, especially when you look at Doctor Strange with incursions. Like, it's all kind of coming together. And this twist with Doctor Doom and Robert Downey Jr. is very, very interesting. And my theory at this point is the fact that I think Robert Downey Jr.'s character is going to be a purged version of Doctor Doom that featured maybe perhaps Tony Stark turning into Doctor Doom, and he gets purged into the Void. And so while he's in the Void, because he is Tony Stark or Victor Von Doom, it doesn't actually matter, while he's in the Void, he tries to escape. Or I think actually him escaping is more likely, because it makes the most sense in terms of like, that's what Avengers Doomsday would be about basically this version of this version of Doctor Doom trying to escape the Void, and they run into the Avengers, whoop, 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 stuff goes down. But I think after that, maybe he goes back into the Void and brings all these different people who are being purged. Maybe there's a mass purge, maybe there's a mass incursion that brings all these heroes to the Void, which is essentially Battle World. So if you follow the Secret Wars comics, and if you know Secret Wars, at least the newer version of it, Secret Wars focused on Battle World, which is where all these different heroes were brought from different universes to fight it out. So it makes sense that there's probably somebody in the Void who's going to bring all these people in, and it might just be Doctor Doom. So making him Tony Stark is still interesting. I'm still not quite sold on that decision. But I do have a lot of faith in Feige and his team, especially if the Russos are involved and their writing staff, because everything that they touch in the MCU is fire. So there's a lot of thought going into this decision. I don't think it was something like, oh, it's going to be easy money. Because honestly, it might hurt them a lot to go this route when you consider all of the options they could have chose for Doctor Doom. They went back to the guy who is the most iconic dude in the entire franchise. And that means something. It's not random. They did this for a reason. So the theory is that at least one of them, this will be a Void version of Doctor Doom that was Tony Stark. He's purged, put into the Void, and now he has to escape the Void. That's what Avengers Doomsday is about. he gets beaten, defeated, or whatever, maybe kicked back into the void, and then he brings all the heroes in there, and that's how you get Secret Wars. Also, one thing that this is a theory of mine, and I don't have any evidence to suggest this, but when they announced Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, there was a bunch of other Dooms there. So he came out and he announced himself as Robert Downey Jr. But what if there's multiple Dooms, right? Like, what if they, like, next week, what if they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, Michael Fassbender? No, actually, sure, Michael Fassbender is going to be Doom, right? Again, or another Doom, right? And then, so all of a sudden, you're starting to see what they're trying to do with the different Dooms. That's just a really long shot theory of mine, is that we might actually have multiple versions of Doom play out over this multiverse saga. We'll see, though, because at this point, we have Fantastic Four coming out in about a year. They announced it as First Steps, which is a very, very big hint that we might get Franklin Richards, which, that's a whole different can of worms right there if they bring Franklin Richards into the story, because if you're familiar with Franklin Richards, his powers are essentially just reality manipulation. This dude can create worlds, destroy worlds with a thought. He's one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, and he might end up being a deus ex machina for the Secret Wars, the way that they're setting this up. Now, calling it First Steps, they're alluding that maybe this child is going to be born in this movie, and maybe his birth leads to the Fantastic Four being tossed into the void, or being tossed into a new reality, a new realm. We know that Galactus is the villain. So there's a lot of interesting strings and a lot of things just floating in the air right now that are starting to kind of come together when you zoom out and look at what MCU might be trying to do. But we will see. Only time will tell. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on Deadpool versus Wolverine. What was your favorite part? Who's your favorite cameo? What was your favorite scene? What didn't you like about it? Let me know. And then while you're down there doing that, make sure you follow and like and subscribe so I can make money and survive. I love you all. Stay safe. Peace.